Hello. Well, if there's any viewers out there, going to do a little editing session, teach you guys a little bit about writing, talk a little bit about the novel. If the music is too loud in the background, just let me know. I'll turn it down a little bit. And now Pete decides to join us. Hey, buddy. What is it? What is it? So basically, in this particular scene, something pretty chaotic just transpired. So I want to leave those emotions in there, but we're also trying to speed up the writing so that it's real quick. A sense of immediacy or a sense of urgency, perhaps, is sort of what we're after here. I'm going to be changing some of the names here as we write this, and just changing some of the grammar, making the sentences, and the words flow a lot better. So that's kind of what we're after here. So it says here, Matthew worried for Michelle and wished his arms could embrace her through the distance. His husbandry was full of effort, but the prolonged arms of sadness between him and Michelle offered no solace for their misery. I'm not sure how I like that sentence there. His husbandry. I'm not sure where I'm going with that here. His husbandry was full of effort, but the prolonged arms of sadness between him and Michelle offered no solace for their misery. It's a little bit long-winded, yeah? I would say. How about we just say his efforts I'm going to cut all this. His efforts only prolonged the arms of sadness between him and Michelle. Great. You see what I mean? We just cut that extra gobbledygook out of there. His efforts only prolonged. So let's see here. Michelle called Matthew again and they spoke with brief tension, right? Matthew worried for Michelle and wished his arms could embrace her through the distance. Matthew worried for her and wished his arms could embrace her through the distance. His efforts only prolonged the arms of sadness between them. So anything you can do to kind of shorten your sentences, make your sentences more concise, that's kind of what we're after here also. You don't always have to constantly reiterate he, her, them. Sometimes it kind of speaks for itself. So we restructured that whole part here. Michelle called Matthew again. They spoke with brief tension. Matthew worried for her. I don't really like how that reads. Matthew worried for her. This will give you a little analysis of what it's like to actually edit your own writing. Michelle called Matthew again, and they spoke with brief tension. We could just say he worried for her. How about he was worried? Worrying for her. How about that? And this process could go on and on for hours, until we get the words right. Worrying for her. He wished His arms could embrace her through the distance. Okay, that reads a little better. Worrying for her, he wished his arms could embrace the distance. He wished his arms could embrace her through the distance. His efforts only prolonged the arms of... Okay, so we've already got arms here. So I don't want to repeat arms again here. So his efforts only prolonged the sadness between them, right? Okay, so we're getting a little closer to what we're trying to say here. Michelle called Matthew again. They spoke with brief tension. Worrying for her, he wished his arms could embrace her through the distance. His efforts only prolonged the sadness between them. You bastard, where the fuck are you? Michelle pleaded through the hysterical sobs of wet tears and clogged nose. Michelle pleaded through hysterical sobs and wet tears. How about that? Because if somebody's crying, we would probably already assume they have a clogged nose, right? I don't know if we need that extra, rhetorical in there or whatever. Fix this little piece of grammar here. I'm leaving the first thing in the AM, Matthew said. We're going to change this to Konstantinos. I talked to Konstantinos, and what the hell were you thinking, Michelle? You've got to get it together. I know your mother is dying. But Michelle cut him off quickly. So we're going to go back and rework some of this here, right? But it's important to read it to yourself over and over and over again. And also, there's actually a feature on here where you can have it read to you, which is also kind of helpful too. Don't tell me anything while you've been up in... We're going to change this back to Syracuse. I came up with all these fictional names when I was originally writing the novel, but I'm changing some of it back to the original names and vice versa. Don't tell me anything while you've been up in Syracuse putting your tenure and students before me and our family. Fix this. You got a lot of nerve, and I'll tell you one thing, Matthew. You better get your ass down here and support me before it's... Let's see here. Before it's all too late. Michelle said. Fix this here. I'll be there soon, but you need to be patient and fucking relax. Matthew said, losing himself in her infected anger. Okay, well, fuck you too. Michelle hung up the phone. So there's a sense of immediacy, right? There's a sense of urgency. Everything flows from, I wanted it to be like bim, bim, bim. Bim, bim, bim. At least for this one part, right? I don't have a lot of time for extra sort of baggage. I just want to say, you must say the thing, right? Michelle hung up the phone. What is going on with Mom? Let's see here. We need a quotation mark. What's going on with Mom? Anthony asked as he overhearing the conversation. Overhearing the conversation. You see what I mean? You got to cut extra baggage out. Any extra words must be cut. Your mother is just going through a lot, and we don't think your grandmother will make it. Let's fix this conversation here. So Anthony says, what's going on with Mom? Anthony asked, overhearing the conversation. Your mother is just going through a lot, and we don't think your grandmother will make it, said Matthew. So anytime you say, I talked about this in my video, but anytime you say something, anytime somebody says something, at least briefly, real quick after it, just kind of reiterate who's talking, right? Because we're going from Anthony's dialogue to his father's dialogue, Matthew. So I just kind of put in here, I don't think your grandmother will make it, said Matthew. That way we kind of know who's talking, right? And then Matthew continues. Hey, Dreamer, yeah, we're working on the novel a little bit. So I hope you'll find this interesting. It's just kind of a spree of the moment thing. I made a video a couple weeks ago about editing, but I want to do this live, as it's more fun, as my art teacher would say, as it's more fun. Just, get some feedback on the emotion, get some feedback on the writing, and just kind of show you guys the insanity that I go through in the writing process. So basically, there's this family, and they got all this shit going on, right? And just a little brief, background on the characters. The Harlow Baratolas family is going through their grandmother's death. And Michelle is the mother, and Matthews is her husband, and Anthony and Lawrence are the brothers. And the grandmother's kind of dying right now. And a bunch of shit just transpired. I don't want to give it away because I want you, when the novel is out, you guys can read it. But basically, the mother tried to self-harm, right? So this is kind of like the aftermath of Michelle trying to come to terms with her emotions with her husband. In bed scrolling, there you are. I'm always here, man. I'm always here somewhere. But I want to start going live more so I can talk more about writing. This is not going to be a real produced, live stream or anything like that. And like I said, if the music is too loud, let me know. We're listening to a little bit of Baroque music. But judging from the previous streams, it should be fine. Your mother is just going through a lot. We don't think your grandmother will make it, said Matthew. She's a little crazy right now, he said, gesturing his pointed finger in a circular motion around his head, indicating that Michelle was crazy. Okay, so that's too wordy, right? I don't really know if Matthew needs to say that. It's a little bit too much information, so I'm going to cut all that. We'll just cut all of that. And we're just going to continue with the dialogue, you see? Is she going to be okay? What's wrong with her? Anthony asked. Again, let's just say asked. Music in the background was a nice touch. Glad to hear it, Neo. Glad to hear it. And I hope this will inspire you guys if you're writing or editing. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. I don't know, Anthony. So we're going to change Brian to Lawrence here. We changed my brother's name to Lawrence. So this is Matthew speaking here. So we should probably reiterate that. I don't know, Anthony, said Matthew. It's just a good little reminder, right? And then you continue on with the dialogue like so. I don't know, Anthony, said Matthew. You and Lawrence are going to stay at Dougie's place while I go down and see what's going on. So basically, Matthew's going down to Virginia to see what the hell is going on, right? See what's going on. Matthew's words offered the adult comfort and the perception of extreme family sadness. Matthew, cut. See what I mean? We just cut it right out. Now we're on to a new chapter. We're going to go through one more chapter with you guys and kind of see where we end up. I'm going to clean this up a little bit here. Just jump to a new page. We're on chapter 58. And I don't think this is going to give too much away because, this is just a little snippet of the middle of the book. And most of you guys are going to read it over again, so I don't think it's going to be a big deal. You have actually inspired me to read more. I used to read a lot when I was younger. I'm really glad to hear that, Yeah, I used to read when I was younger, too, and then, life kind of pulls us out of our books and puts our eyes on things that we shouldn't be watching or reading. And then we sort of find our way back to the novels. We find our way back to the great masters, We find our ears back on classical music, So it's sort of like being jaded, It's being like when you grow up, you're a kid, and then you're an adolescent, and then you're a teenager, and then all of a sudden you're an adult, and you've sort of experienced the whole gambit of the candy store. And you've tasted every candy, you've experienced every pleasure, right? But after a while, you're just like, so fucking what? So you start to sort of go back in time. You start to sort of go back into introspection and the memories that you had and the things that had inspired you from the beginning. and you sort of find your way back to artistry. You know, you start to find your way back to Marcel Proust, or you find your way back to Thomas Wolfe, or you find your way back to Mozart, or you find your way back to, you know, whatever it is that you're into that initially inspired you, that sort of gets masked by the real world. So we're on chapter 58 here. It says, Matthew dropped his two beautiful sons off at Dougie's house the next morning. His two beautiful sons? That's unnecessary. Matthew dropped his sons off at Dougie's house the next morning. The winding road of the neighborhood was full of happy memories of time spent with Dougie on Friday nights playing with toys until the sun went to sleep, or the orange-filled sky of the sun's evening on Halloween nights, trick-or-treating with Dougie and the nearby children. So that's a really, really long sentence. Let's redo that here. Anthony dropped his sons off at Dougie's house the next morning. We might rework that first sentence. The winding road of the neighborhood was full of happy memories of time spent with Dougie on Friday nights, playing with toys until the sun went to sleep, or the orange filled, what am I saying there? Or the orange-filled sky of the sun. Blah. You know, that you go back and read some of your shit, and it's like, you know, it throws you for a loop. But I like some of it. The winding road of the neighborhood was full of happy memories. I'm going to make this easier on myself. I'm just going to put a period. The winding road of the neighborhood was full of happy memories. Or we could do something like this too. The road was winding, full of happy memories. The road was winding, full of happy memories of time spent with Dougie on Friday nights playing with toys until the sun went to. So there's just a little bit too much information there, right? Hope you're well. Are you going to write your own book? Allie says. Yeah, that's what we're writing right now. We're on page 180. We're actually not writing. We're actually editing. The whole thing is actually written. But this is like the first sort of rewrite process. So that's kind of what we're in the midst of. The road was winding. And I don't know if I like that. The road was winding. So I might have to rework this whole section here. The road was winding, but we're just going to kind of get a general idea. The road was winding, full of happy memories and of times spent with Dougie on Friday nights. See, I was sort of trying to go for like this, what's up, Gothic? How you doing? I missed you so much. Glad to hear it. The road was winding with happy memories. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm... The road was winding... The road was winding... Yeah, let's stick with Dreamer's idea here. The road was winding with... And that way we kind of set, you know, we can explain more later, right? And that's another thing, too, when you write, don't try to explain everything in the first sentence, you know, unless you're Marcel Proust. I think that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to do like this long Proustian sentence, you know, like the implications of the emotions that, you know, Mademoiselle Swann felt led to the introspection of the earlier memories of the outward emotion, you know, but you can't try to copy other writers, right? Because you'll just end up running in circles. So we're gonna write here. The road was winding with happy. The road was winding. What did we say here? Road was winding with happy memories. I'm actually gonna cut most of this here. But I think we could keep some of this here. I'll show you here. The evening sun went to sleep. So we're talking about Halloween here. That's not really that important. Cutting all that. The evening sun went to sleep. The road was winding with happy memories as the evening sun went to sleep. That way you can kind of combine one idea, that makes sense with another, right? The road was winding with happy memories as the evening sun went to sleep. As the evening sun went to sleep. The looming death of Pabby. Now, Pabby is like a nickname for my grandmother. The looming death of Pabby seemed to close the curtain on the brothers' lost and dying years of childhood. Pabby's voice and eyes spoke to them as she lay comatose, ready to enter the next world, so far away in the green heat of the Virginia Beach. So that, okay. The looming death. How about Pabby's death loomed? Pabby's death loomed, right? That says it in 3 words. We don't have to say the looming death of Pabby. We cut out like 4 words there. Just said, or cut out 2 words. We just say Pabby's death loomed. So we cut out 2 words. We changed it from the looming death of. It's too wordy. So you just say Pabby's death loomed. It just, bim, bim, bim. Pabby's death loomed. Now we got to figure out how to finish it. Pabby's death loomed, seeming to close the curtain. You see what I mean? Seeming to close the curtain on the brothers' lost and dying years of childhood, period. We could maybe shorten that, right? But I think that kind of gets a little closer to what we're aiming at here. Pabby's death loomed, seeming to close the curtain on the brothers' lost and dying years of childhood. Pabby's voice and eyes spoke to them as she lay comatose, ready to enter the next world, so far away, because I don't like this part, so far away. Pabby's voice and eyes spoke to them as she looked. Pabby's voice spoke to them. Your eyes don't really speak, do they? So you catch yourself in these mistakes and you just cut them right out. Pabby's voice spoke to them as she lay comatose, ready to enter the next world. See, that whole section is so much better now. I'm going to click the save button. Matthew thanked Dougie's mother. Let's say Matthew thanked Dougie's mother, Beth. We'll just give her a name here because that's her name. Matthew thanked Dougie's mother, Beth, and then drove off into the cool dawn of early May. Anthony and Lawrence. I don't know what this word is here. Anthony and Lawrence, something, their saddened minds and the temporary surround. Anthony and Lawrence lost their lost. So I don't know if this part is even really that important. Yeah, we're editing here, Charles. Just doing a little editing session. I'm probably just going to get to the end of this next chapter. and then we'll just kind of sit around and talk for a little bit. But I'm actually having a lot of fun doing this. I made a couple of videos a couple of weeks ago just with the editing process, but I thought it'd be a little more fun doing it live, so that's kind of what we're doing. Matthew thanked Dougie's mother Beth. So I don't really like how that reads there, but I really like this part. Matthew dropped his sons off at Dougie's house the next morning. The road was winding with happy memories as the evening sun went to sleep. Pabby's death loomed, seeming to close the curtain on the brothers' lost and dying years of childhood. Pabby's voice spoke to them as she lay comatose, ready to enter the next world. So I might have to go back and reiterate exactly what I mean by that, right? Pabby's voice spoke to them. It's a cool idea, but it's a little too esoteric, right? Like, how do they know her voice is speaking to them? But I think in the context of the omnipresent narrator, it kind of works, right? Matthew thanked Dougie's mother Beth and then drove off into the cool dawn of early May. So that might actually work. How about we just say Matthew said goodbye and then said goodbye, comma, driving off. See what I mean? You want to make it as concise as you possibly can. Matthew said goodbye, comma, driving off into the cool dawn of early May. Anthony and Lawrence lost minds in the temporary surroundings of Anthony. I don't even know what I'm trying to say there. I have no idea what I was trying. I just built Dougie a brand new tree fort in the backyard. Make sure you show Anthony and Lawrence. We're going to change this to Lawrence. Lawrence later. So let's see here. Let's introduce Dougie's father. Dougie's father walked into the kitchen with a disappointed demeanor. I could say something like that, because Dougie's mother or Dougie's father disappointed demeanor. I just built Dougie a brand new tree fort in the backyard. He said, right? That way everybody knows who's talking. Make sure you show Anthony and Lawrence later. We don't really need Dougie's father said. Doug's father had a mustache and receding hairline. So we're going to cut this here, put this right down here. Doug's father had a mustache and receding hairline. A stern but welcoming, I already said demeanor. How about he was stern? He was stern but welcoming. Dominated his body. He was stern but welcoming, right? So a little quick sentence. He was stern but welcoming. It paints the picture of what he's like. He's welcoming, he's accommodating, but he's also stern, right? He was very stern with this kid, Dougie. I don't know why that's not letting me do this here. Dougie's mother was a short, fat Italian woman who demanded to sleep in a separate bed from her husband as their love life had taken a dead-end turn in the trials and tribulations of marriage. So that's a really long sentence, right? Dougie's mother was a short, fat Italian woman, right? So we'll just leave it at that. Dougie's mother was a short, fat Italian woman. She demanded to sleep in separate beds. in separate beds from her husband as their love life had taken a dead-end turn. She demanded to sleep in separate beds from her husband since their love life had taken since their love life had ended, maybe had grown stale, had grown old. Give me some ideas here, people. She demanded to sleep in separate beds from her husband since their love. I don't really like how that reads there, since their love. She demanded to sleep in separate beds ever since. Give me an idea here. Dead end turn is good. It's quite good, but is it a little too cliche? She demanded to sleep in separate beds from her husband since their love life had taken a dead end turn. Move the trials and tribulations. Like a dead end turn, right? So we could maybe just keep it like that. Is that what you're saying? I agree with you. Something like that. She demanded to sleep in separate beds from her husband since her love life had taken a dead end turn. That could possibly work. We could always go back and redo it again, right? Charles says stagnant. Which part is stagnant? That's the question, is does that sentence really say anything? Is it necessary? Does it really mean anything? She demanded to... I don't even know if we really need that. Because we're talking about Dougie's father here, so why all of a sudden are we talking about... We don't need all this background information. Okay, I see what you're saying here. She demanded to sleep in separate beds from her husband since their love life had turned stagnant. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that's good. As their love turned stagnant. But I'm also questioning if we need all that background information. But I think it sort of paints a little bit of an interesting picture, right? There's a little, you want to add some tension into the scene, right? My art teacher always talks about adding tension to your paintings and stuff. So you want to have, it's the same thing with writing. You got to have some tension here. He was stern, but Dougie's mother was a short, fat Italian woman. She demanded to sleep in separate beds from her husband as their love turned stagnant. So this is Dougie's mother talking. It's so good to see you, boys, Beth said. I introduced her as Beth a couple chapters previously, so if you're wondering who Beth is Dougie's mother. I'm sorry about your grandmother. So we're saying Dougie's mother said, so we don't need that again. I'll cut that. This is why editing is so important, because you just make it 10 times better. I'm going to make you all some chocolate chip cookies, and you all make yourself at home. Do you remember when Dougie's mother made us chocolate chip cookies, Charles? That was great. So this is Dougie's mother speaking here. Let's go play my new Mortal Kombat video game, Dougie said, as he led Lawrence and Anthony away. The room was covered in video games and action figures and movies something throughout the room and on. Too long. The room was covered in video games and action figures, period. Movies cluttered Movies were strewn. Movies were strewn throughout the room and onto the floors. A large couch sat lazily on the rugged floor. Dreama says lead, not lead. So where is that part here? Lead, yeah. I hear you. That's like the difference between, I'm still learning the difference between your and your. The two different your spellings. I kind of mastered that while I was writing. Took me about 2 years. Dougie, okay, so let's put Dougie said back up here. Dougie said, period. He led Lawrence and Anthony away. The room was covered in video games and action figures. Movies were strewn throughout the room. And on the floors. A large couch sat lazily across the room. A large couch. Indent that. He led Lawrence and Anthony away. The room was covered in video games and action figures. Movies were strewn throughout the room and on the floors, with a large couch sitting lazily across. Sitting lazily across. I watched an R-rated movie last night, Dougie said quietly to the brothers. Oh, wow, what was it about? Lawrence inquired. Let's get rid of that well. I tend to start too many of my dialogue sections with well. So I don't remember the whole story. Let's fix this. I don't remember the whole story, but this evil guy killed this woman and cut off her breast. I remember when my friend Dougie was watching all these R-rated movies, right? And like his mother would just take him to the local video store or whatever, and she wasn't really like checking to see what kind of movies he was renting. So he was renting all kinds of crazy shit. I don't remember the whole story, but this evil guy killed this woman and cut off her breast. Anthony was disturbed by this evil predicament and wondered why or how Dougie had witnessed such a movie. After a few moments, Dougie's mother walked in. So I want to rework this part. Disturbed. Maybe rework this part. Strewn throughout the room implies on the floor. Seems a bit redundant. Let's go back there. So you're saying we should take... Yeah, I see what you're saying here. Movies were strewn on the floor. Movies were strewn on the floor. Yeah, you're absolutely right. See, you caught me there. You got me good there. I probably would have caught that if I went back again, but I didn't catch it the first time. Movies were strewn on the floor, with a large couch sitting lazily across. Movies were strewn on the floor. Okay, we could cut out the floor part if we want to be even more to the point. Movies were strewn. So they'll just assume it's on the floor, maybe. Movies were strewn with a large couch sitting lazily across. That's good. That's good too. The room was covered in video games and action figures. Movies were strewn with a large couch sitting lazily across. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Strewn throughout the room, large couch sitting in its center. Interesting. Strewn. I thought you said you didn't want throughout the room. You want to keep the throughout, strewn throughout, or you want to cut that? You say, movies were strewn throughout the room, large couch sitting in its center. strewn about. We got all kinds of contenders here. We got strewn across. We got strewn about. We got strewn through. Movies were strewn about. Yeah, I think it needs something after strewn. Strewn's a little too, you know, I'm saying strewn throughout the room and on its floor was redundant. Removing floor makes it tidier. Movies were strewn about with a large couch sitting lazily in this. Okay, I see what you're saying. So we could stick with this for now. Movies were strewn about with a large couch sitting lazily in the center. I like that idea of, but I don't know if it was sitting in the center. The couch was more off to the wall. Sitting lazily to the wall. Something like that. We could just make it to the center if it reads better. I watched an R-rated movie last night, Dougie said quietly. Oh, wow, what was it about? Lawrence inquired. I don't remember the whole story, but this evil guy killed this woman and cut off her breast. Should I say Dougie said? I don't think we need to say Dougie said. Anthony was disturbed by the evil predicament. So this needs to be reworked here. Anthony was disturbed by... Charles says, I don't like strewn, tossed, and like a hurricane hit the entire eastern board. Yeah, maybe strewn is too, you can go back and rework it again. Movies were haphazardly placed. Movies were scattered. Great, 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 great. Movies were scattered about. Movies were scattered about with a large couch sitting lazily to the wall, or something like that. We can always go back and rework it. Scattered, that's a great word. Thank you for that. Movies were scattered about. So you guys are getting obsessed with this one little sentence here, which is cool. We'll go back and work on it. I do kind of want to move on to this next part here. Anthony was disturbed by this evil predicament and wondered why or how Dougie had witnessed such a move. Too wordy. Anthony was disturbed, period. He wondered why or how Dougie had witnessed such a movie. That's better. Scattered, yes, scattered. Can we all agree on scattered? Anthony was disturbed. He wondered why. How and why? What's better, why or how? He wondered how and why. He wondered why or how Dougie had witnessed such a movie. After a few moments, Dougie's mother walked in. I thought maybe you all would like to go rent some movies this evening, but no R-rated movies, Dougie, she said sternly. His thoughts were interrupted as Dougie's mother walked in. That could work. Yeah, it kind of leaves it ambiguous. His thoughts were interrupted as Beth walked in. After a few moments, or cut that out. Let's see here. His thoughts were interrupted as Beth walked in. Yeah, that's perfect. That's much more to the point. Now Dream was laughing at me for some reason. Oh man, I thought maybe you all would like to go rent some movies this evening, but no R-rated movies. Dougie, she said sternly. Let's say she kill that capital. Can't remove the previous phrase then. Okay, Mom, her son replied. Let's say, okay, Mom, Dougie replied. Despite Dougie's mother's tone says Anthony felt disturbed, wondering and why Dougie had seen such a gruesome film. That's good too. Anthony felt disturbed. Yeah, I want to get away from felt and because like when you say felt, you're kind of weaseling your way out of the immediacy of the scene. So we could just say, how about this? Disturbed Anthony. We're going to use a little bit of Tome's idea there. Disturbed Anthony wondered. Let's just say wondered why Dougie had seen such a gruesome film. You know what I mean? Disturbed. Anthony wondered why Dougie had seen such a... So we get away from all the Anthony felt, Anthony did, Anthony walked, Anthony... You know, just say disturbed. Anthony wondered why Dougie had seen such a gruesome film. His thoughts were interrupted. Okay. Okay, Mom, Dougie replied. Despite Dougie's mother's best efforts, her son had somehow snuck or gotten a hold of many R-rated movies and watched them into the wee hours of the morning as his parents slept. So this was kind of like a thing back in the early 90s and the late 80s. I mean, anybody that grew up before the days of the internet, we all did this, right? We stayed up late, watched R-rated movies. I remember one time I tried to rent The Howling. I'm not sure if it was The Howling 1 or The Howling 2 or whatever, but I popped it in and just watched like 30 seconds of the intro and was like, this is way too scary. And I turned it off because I knew I wasn't supposed to be watching it, you know. Remember how cool we all thought we were? Well, yeah, we thought we were cool watching R-rated movies. And what was that cartoon? South Park. I used to stay up late watching South Park with Dougie. Okay, Mom, Dougie replied. Despite Dougie's mother's best efforts, her son has... Dougie... How about you say... Recently... Dougie had... I don't need somehow. Recently, Dougie had snuck or gotten the hell. Recently, Dougie had snuck many. Recently, Dougie had. Not me. Would have got my rear popped. You didn't sneak R-rated movies back in the day, Dreama? You must have. Maybe certain families didn't do that, but I guess it says a lot about the poor parental structure at our house and my friend's house. Recently, Dougie had snuck many R-rated movies and watched them into the wee hours of the morning as his parents slept. That's kind of a cool sentence. How about we say here, but nothing... Nothing R-rated, because we already said movies. And this woman kind of had a real hard R. She was like, nothing R-rated, Dougie. And I might try to implement that, like what her voice sounded like later on, but she said sternly. I don't even know if we need that. I was too scared to get whooped. Movies doesn't make sense. I don't know what you mean by that, Tomes. Recently, Dougie had snuck many R-rated movies and watched them into the wee hours of the morning as his parents slept. Anthony and Lawrence had not yet seen any art. That's not really true, though, is it? Feared the concept of them. Anthony and Lawrence feared the graphic nature of explicit films, yet journeyed. Anthony and Lawrence feared the graphic nature of explicit films, Yet what? Then mention R-rated and the as it currently is. I'll have to figure out what it is you're getting at there. Hold on a second. I need a refill, guys. Hold on. Anthony and Lawrence feared the graphic nature of explicit films, yet journeyed into the darkness, or what would they have done? Give me an idea here. The DVDs of R-rated films were scattered across the... Can't scatter a movie on the... I guess you could scatter movies. I guess you could scatter movies. I don't know. They weren't DVDs, though. They were like old cassettes, like from the late 90s. You know what I'm saying? Fearing the graphic nature. How about that? Fearing the graphic nature of explicit films. Tempted themselves with fear. I don't know. That's just a rough idea. Ventured into the realm out of curiosity. Yeah. Fearing the graphic nature of Anthony and Lawrence ventured into morbid curiosity. You know? So now we have another chapter. I've lost track of what chapter we're on here. So that was a really short chapter. Chapter 58 is really short. Maybe it could be longer. But so we're on chapter 58. But I'm just going to make a new chapter because this next chapter is quite a bit different. So we're on chapter 59. Save as. I think we'll kind of leave it at that. I'll just kind of hang out with you guys for a little bit. I'm not sure how long we've been live here. Let me see. Almost an hour? That's crazy. We've been live for almost an hour. I like the end of the chapter. Me too. Like, it's okay to have short chapters. You look at Charles Bukowski or, you know, the guy that wrote The Howling or any of those great writers. Short chapters are great. Long chapters tend to be very draining. And I wouldn't say that any of my chapters are longer than maybe 6 pages at the most, and even that's rare. So, you know, we could go back and do a read-through and catch more mistakes, you know, but I think for now that's pretty good. I like the last sentence of that chapter. Yeah, me too. Recently, Dougie had Let's just cut out many. There's another unnecessary word. Recently, Dougie had snuck R-rated movies and watched them into the wee hours of the morning. as his parents slept. We could fix that. That's a little too wordy right there. Fearing the graphic nature of explicit films, Anthony and Lawrence ventured into morbid curiosity. You know, and that could mean any number of things. That could mean with the films, or that could mean with life in general. Do you guys want to try to hack away at another chapter, or have you guys had enough here? We could just sit and talk about writing and editing for. I don't want to overdo it, you know. But if you guys want to maybe try hack away at one more paragraph or something, we can do that together. Because I really like your guys' ideas. And you guys, I have like second and third and fifth, sixth eyes on this, which is really helpful. We have another suggestion from Tones here that says, how about starting with as his parents slept? I think that might be interesting. Let's try that. So you're saying at the beginning of this sentence, we could start with as his parents slept. So it would be like, as his parents slept, Dougie snuck R-rated movie. Yeah, that's good. I think that's good. Is that what you're saying? I don't really like recently either. As Dougie's parents slept. See, and then we got to reiterate Dougie somehow. As his parents slept, yeah. As his parents slept, Dougie snuck R-rated movies and watched them into the wee hours of the morning. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Very, very nice. Well done. Voila, bravo. Fearing the graphic nature of explicit films, Anthony and Lawrence ventured into the morbid curiosity with their friend or something. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how this last sentence, how to implicate that into what we're doing with Dougie. Yeah, recently sounds formal academic writing. Chef's kiss. I like that line. Good ending to the chapter. Yeah. Comma before Anthony and Lawrence. Fearing the graphic nature of explicit films, Anthony and Lawrence ventured into morbid curiosity. So, you know, I think that's pretty decent. You know, we could go back again and redo it, but that's pretty decent. Moving on here. Matthew had finally arrived at 5 o'clock p.m. into the heat and sun of Virginia Beach Airport. Matthew had finally arrived. You need a into the end sentence? Huh? You don't need finally unless it delay. Okay, so we're moving on here. Matthew had arrived at 5 o'clock p.m. into the heat, in the heat and sun of Virginia Beach Airport. Matthew arrived. Let's take out had, because anytime you this is unnecessary too. Had, just say Matthew arrived. Matthew arrived at 5 o'clock p.m. in the heat and sun. Matthew arrived at I think it might actually be the Norfolk Airport, but I'm not sure. So we're gonna cut out that. We're gonna make this more of a. Matthew arrived at 5 o'clock p.m. at the Virginia Beach Airport. The heat and sun of. Okay, so we don't need that. Matthew arrived at 5 o'clock p.m. at the Virginia Beach Airport. We might rework that. Greeted by the heat and sun. Okay? His stomach was sick and uneasy from lack of food and the thought of facing Michelle's rage. His stomach was sick and his stomach was sick and uneasy from lack of food and the thought of facing Michelle's rage. He wore a short-sleeve island shirt like Bucho from Desperado. Okay, so I don't think anybody's really going to know who Bucho from Desperado is. Unfortunately. He wore a short-sleeve island shirt. We're going to cut this out here. How about wearing? I'm going to show you what I'm doing here, guys. Wearing a short sleeve. Does anybody even know what an island shirt is? Wearing a short sleeve island shirt. He stepped off the plane. So, okay, so I'm just going to pause the music here for a second because I want to explain something to you guys. Whenever you can substitute he did, he wore, he said, you want to put it, at least I think it's better if you put it in a, what do you call it? A sort of an action sequence, wearing. Instead of he wore, we changed it to wearing a short sleeve island shirt, comma, he stepped off the plane. That way it's more like you're reading a script or something, right? Or it's just more immediate that way. Because when you start defaulting into he did this, she did this, it's not as, it's just not as interactive, I guess you could say. Get rid of into the afternoon. I think we did that already. We have another suggestion for Matthew hit Virginia Beach Airport at 5 in the hot sun on his skin. Yeah, that's good. Matthew hit Virginia Beach Matthew hit Virginia Beach Airport at 5 p.m. greeted by the heat and sun. That's good. That's pretty immediate. We could just say 5, right? But would you guys like 5 p.m. or do you guys like 5 better? Well, I think I kind of already explained it here because he's greeted by the heat and the sun. So that's why he knows it's going to be hot, so that's why he's wearing an island shirt. His stomach was sick and uneasy from lack of food, comma, thought of facing Michelle's rage did something to him, filled him with anxiety. How about filled with anxiety of facing Michelle's rage. Put that period back where it goes. The sun hot on his skin suggested nice. His stomach, let me fix this here. Shout out to all the 8 people in the chat. Appreciate you guys hanging around. Something a little bit different for you guys. If you guys like this series, please give it a like. We currently have no likes. Come on, guys. Let's get this stream some likes, and we'll finish this chapter. Maybe we'll just finish this paragraph, and we'll call it a night. But I'm having a good time doing this. Reminded of her rage, Matthew, something odd comfort, took comfort in the fact that he chose an island shirt. His stomach was sick and uneasy from lack of food, filled with anxiety of facing Michelle's rage. I wonder if this could be another paragraph, possibly. Wearing a short sleeve island shirt. We don't need to say short sleeve, do we? Let's just cut that out. Like, does it really matter that he's wearing an island shirt? I'm going to cut that out. Stepping off the plane. He walked with confidence and carried his briefcase down the escalators and long hallways of the causeway. Period. Reaching, see what I mean with the action? Instead of he reached, we say reaching the outside, comma, he waited for a taxi. Now, we didn't really explain that he called a taxi, right? But, you know, you can't sit here and explain every single thing. So you kind of have to just take liberties with it. I like the island shirt detail. It just needs to fit in somewhere. Yeah, maybe we'll add it later. I just think now that it's distracting because I'm trying to get Matthew back to Michelle, right? So all these extra details are kind of like unnecessary. Stepping off the plane in an island shirt, something like that. Stepping off the plane, he walked with confidence and carried his briefcase down the escalators and long hallways of the causeway. Reaching the outside, he waited for a taxi. The hot sun plastered his face with potential sunburn. As he reached into his carry-on bag, comma, placing his sunglasses over his eyes. See, that's 100% better. Reaching the outside, he waited for a taxi. The hot sun plastered his face with potential sunburn as he reached into his carry-on bag, placing his sunglasses over his eyes. He felt the heat on his cheeks. So I'm going to get rid of the he felt. Anytime you can get rid of he felt, do it. And we can do it here quite easily. Don't get rid of it. I mean, occasionally you can use that. But in most cases, you can put it in a sort of an action sequence where you don't have to say he felt something. It's all about describing feelings. Yeah, it is. Like, you can default into that sometimes, but you don't want that to become a crutch. And you can keep it simple, like Ernest Hemingway. He felt the heat on his cheeks and nose, but we could just say he felt the heat on his face. Let's simplify that. He felt the heat on his face. So that's another thing, too. Always simplify number one and then kind of go from there. Simplify something into a simpler sentence, into a simpler word, and then go from there. He felt the heat on his face and the swelter of the sun's light on his bushy black hair. Feeling the heat on his face and hair, the sun's light Sweltered on him. That's not quite right, but it's a little closer. Feeling the heat on his face and hair, the sun sweltered on him or something. We could just cut it. The sun sweltered on him. The hot sun of Virginia sent rays of warm heat onto the flesh of his neck and his underarms. On the flesh of his neck and his underarms began to sweat as he waved for a taxi. One stopped and picked him up. So let's go back to this part here. Stepping off the plane, he walked with confidence, comma, carrying his briefcase down the escalators. To the long hallways of the causeway. Reaching the outside, comma, he waited for a taxi. The hot sun plastered his face with potential sunburn. The hot sun plastered his face with potential sunburn as he reached into his carry-on bag. As he reached into his carry-on bag for his sunglasses. We don't really need to say he placing his sunglasses. Like, obviously, he's going to put them over his eyes, right? So that's another thing, too. When in doubt, don't say the obvious. Like, Matthew is hot, he's sweating, he's walking through the airport, he's walking through the causeway, he's got his carry-on bag, and he reaches into his bag to get his sunglasses. Everybody's pretty much going to know what he's going to do with his sunglasses, where he's going to put his sunglasses. So you don't want to spoon feed people. Reaching the outside, he waited for a taxi. The hot sun plastered his face with potential sunburn as he reached into his carry-on bag for his sunglasses. Now, we could even shorten that even more, but I don't feel like doing it right now. But I could probably trim that sentence up even more, like Ernest Hemingway style or Charles Bukowski style, if I wanted to, but I kind of like the way it's going now. Feeling the heat on his face and hair, the sun sweltered on him. Sun sweltered over him. Now, we just said that the heat was on his face, so this whole sentence here might have to be cropped. The hot sun of Virginia, his neck, we could cut out this and just say, yeah, see what I mean? The flesh of his neck. The flesh of his neck met the sun's rays or something like that. The sun bore down on his neck. We already said, let's say here. Yeah, we could say that. The sun bore down on the flesh of his neck. It kind of gives like a little brutal indication of how hot it is. The sun bore down on the flesh of his neck. That's pretty cool. The sun bore down on the flesh of his neck. Take out that and, comma. The sun bore down on the flesh of his neck, comma. His underarms began to sweat. His underarms sweating. See what I mean? You don't need to say began. His underarms sweating as he waited for a taxi. I mean, that's just great. That's a good image. The sun bore down on the flesh of his neck. His underarms sweating as he waved for a taxi. One stopped and picked him up. So let's stop there, guys. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. You guys can read a little bit on ahead if you want. But hopefully that inspired you guys not only to write, but more importantly to edit. And that's really what this process is all about. Like the editing is kind of like, or the writing is kind of like the playtime. You know, that's like the I don't know what you would call it, but the editing, that's like when the real work comes into play, because you're basically dissecting and analyzing every single thing you wrote, and I mean, this has taken me a really, really long time to do it, and I still have like 300 pages to go. So, that's kind of how it goes. But writing and editing are really two separate enterprises. They're not really the same thing. I mean, they're kind of one and the same because I'm kind of rewriting, right? But at least I have like a blueprint. You know what I'm saying? Like, I never understood how a writer could just, write a first draft. I don't believe that ever happens. Like you would have to believe that a writer was, the most and maybe if a writer like spends years and years and years writing and editing, he could maybe, blow off a few first drafts and that are at least close to a final draft. But like, it's you have to have an editor, and even best case scenario, even when I'm done editing it, I would like to hand it over to somebody else for a pair of second eyes. But that may or may not be necessary, but that could be necessary. We have a good question here from Giova, Chris Giovanetti. How long do you just write before go back and edit? That's a good question. It depends. Like, ideally, I would take a year off from a first draft and then come back to it. But I don't know how long we're going to be alive, so I don't really have time to sit around. Like, if I had like 5 or 10 manuscripts like in the making, I could maybe spend some time and come back to some of them. But this is like my main inspiration, or my main, and my main. I don't know what you would call it. My main activity right now. It's my main project. So I'm kind of trying to have a sense of urgency, but also I'm not rushing it too. But ideally, I would take like a year off, just get away from it, and then come back to it. And then you come back to it with a sense of freshness, as if you'd never read it before, right? And I'm sort of getting that sense when I come back and read it now, because this book is maybe going on 5 or 6 months old now since I finished it, and it took me about 3 years to actually write this novel. So certain parts are pretty old to me and they're pretty fresh. But when I go back and read it, like obviously I know my family history, so I kind of know what the story is going to be. So, but like the writing itself, like that's the fun part about editing, is like you go back and read this and you're like, no, that's not good. I can make that so much better. But then there's a chance you might go back to it again in a year after it's published, and you'll say, well, I could have changed that again. So eventually you do kind of have to let the novel speak for itself. But ideally, if I had, stacks and stacks of manuscript, and I have a lot of manuscripts, but as far as like finished projects, I don't have enough to really, I guess I could take a year off from this, but what really would I gain from that? I think you gain more from chipping away at it. It's almost like sculpting, like you're chipping away at a stone, and you slow, and then you slowly unveil the project. You slowly unveil, you cut out all the unnecessary stuff, and you get to the point of what you're trying to say there. Like, but this is pretty daunting. And Charles says here, I think he just writes it and then edits it later. Yeah. And that's what you should do. But what I should have done is maybe edited chapter by chapter. That way I wouldn't be facing like a 500-page manuscript that's not edited at all. So I've learned a lot in this process. The next time I do this, I will probably, maybe when I write a chapter, maybe I'll spend a week editing it, right? That way when I go back and face it, it's not like I'm facing, 200 chapters that are unedited. But just, at the same point in time, there's something to be said for just editing cold, like just writing and just like vomiting. You know, it's a very vomitatory process. Like you're just sitting in front of the typer, bleeding and vomiting or whatever. Like Ernest Hemingway says, writing is easy. You just sit at the typer and bleed. It's kind of like that, or you bleed or you vomit, and then you come back and clean it up later. But if you can structure little editing sessions in between, it might make the process a little easier. You know, or maybe if you have an editor, if you're that prestigious, or if you have somebody that you can trust to spend time on your writing, you know, that would be ideal. But like I trust myself the most, and then I might, once I see it as good as it can be, then maybe I'll consider handing it over to somebody else. And of course, everybody says, "Oh yeah, I'd love to read your novel. I'll edit your novel," and you send it to them, and they never fucking read it, right? It's kind of like when people say, "Oh, I'm praying for you." They're not really praying for you, you know. They're just saying that to be nice, right? So it's very difficult to find somebody that is actually going to be invested in what it is you're doing and even wants to collaborate too, you know, like in terms of an editor, you know. But ideally I would probably maybe structure a monthly editing session, and that way I'm not facing a huge manuscript that's completely unedited. But having said that, like I said, I'm talking in circles now, but I think it's kind of fun to just have a huge manuscript that's not edited. That way I can spend another, you know, 6 months, another year on it, maybe more, just getting it to where it needs to be. Versus if you try to edit too soon, this is what I've been trying to say the last 5 minutes, but if you edit too soon, it's too fresh. You don't have any like discretion over it. So that was a really long-winded rant. Took me 6 years to publish my first one, and it's very short. Yeah, how long is your manuscript, Dreama? I'd be interested to hear about that. Bleed first and then heal. Yeah, I mean that the writing process is you know, it's about healing, but it's also about bleeding. It's about suffering, and just like I think the you know, I don't want to say being a writer is lonely because that's kind of cliche, but it's kind of lonely because just the nature of it. But it's not even the loneliness. It's more of the discipline that it really takes. And you could maybe take that idea to other enterprises. Like some people have really good discipline at something else, but when it comes to writing, there's a certain, in maybe like fine art or something, like drawing and painting. Those are probably the two things that I've ever done that take a certain type of discipline. Maybe it's similar to other things. Maybe like my brother does stock trading, you know, and that's a certain kind of lonely discipline maybe in itself. Or maybe people that you know work on, I don't know, other enterprises that are kind of solitary, right? Maybe they're working out, trying to lose weight. That's kind of a lonely enterprise. You know, hitting the gym all the time. You go to the gym by yourself or whatever, or you go out running by yourself. Or, you know, hopefully you've got people to egg you on and stuff. But I think any creative act, there's an element of not only loneliness to it, but just the sheer discipline and the sheer insanity that it takes to really do this type of thing. You know, and you have to kind of fight the real world at every turn, you know, constantly. Vomitatory is a great word. Yeah, it's kind of what it is. Like it's not like being sick, but like I'm enjoying the writing process is great, you know. But that's where all the fun is. But when you go back and edit, it's not always that fun. Like you know, I have my good days and my really bad days with editing, but it's just part of the craft, so to speak. You know, and not only is it like you get obsessed with it, you know, you could go on and on and on, and but like I have a pretty good routine. Like I spend maybe an hour or two, sometimes less, maybe just an hour, half an hour editing. Sometimes I edit, you know, just one page, or nights if I'm lucky I'll edit like 5 or 6 pages. And then slowly it starts to kind of build up and build up, but there's so many other details that you kind of have to go back and redo it again and reread it. And but eventually you kind of have to like just, you know, let the ship sail. My first book was only 72 pages. See, that's quite long too. That's quite long. I was listening to a John Gardner interview. Nobody knows who the fuck John Gardner is, but he's a pretty interesting writer, and he says like even if you just write a 5-page short story, spend 6 months on it, edit it, make sure it's good until it sounds like magic, and that's like writing a song or learning a trade or something like that. But there's not too many things that I'm really good at. I think I have some potential with writing, even more so than I do with sort of the fine art thing. My art remains to this day, very quirky and very untrained and very. But I think with the writing, there's a certain thing about it that I can get my point across in more of a way that's going to make sense. My third is 228 pages. That's pretty long. That's very long. You know, do you have a title for this novel? Yeah, the working title is called, as you see here, A Book Unopened. Or as you saw previously, I don't even know if I still have this Microsoft Word thing open. But I like that idea of a book unopened. And that whole sentence comes into play later on in the novel with, it sort of pertains to the idea of nothing is ever as good as it initially seems. The love is always better before the first kiss. The book is always better before it's opened. The meal is always better before it's tasted. And once you've actually experienced something, all the magic is lost. So I think I might title the book A Book Unopened, just to kind of introduce that whole universe, sort of that little philosophical concept that, it's almost a Proustian idea or maybe a Thomas Wolfe type thing, but I'm sort of doing it a little bit different, and sort of that first satisfaction, that first inspiration that you get before you actually experience something, that's where all the actual joy is. Do you see what I'm saying? And after that, like, hopefully it gets better, and it does in some cases, but eventually, you know, there's something to be said for that initial inspiration before you actually do something. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm not communicating it in a certain, perceivable manner, but it's like, oh, I want this new job, and then you get the job, and you're like, eh. Or I want that woman, and you get that woman, and then eventually things go to shit, and you're like, eh. And then, or like, I want to take that drink, and you take that drink, and before you know it, you've had too many. Or you want to win the lottery, and you win the lottery, and then that doesn't make you happy. Or you want to move to a new city, and then that doesn't make you happy. So there's something to be said. That's why the book, I think, is going to be called A Book Unopened, because it kind of opens up that whole idea. So anyway, hopefully that made sense. Go over it again and again. Yeah, over and over again and again. Eventually I'll have to stop, just, but like, I would like to give this, like, my dad was helping me sort of edit it at first, but then I saw so many corrections that I knew I could make on my own. But he actually like really influenced the beginning of the novel. Um, he encouraged me to cut out the whole introduction, and he gave me a lot of really interesting anecdotes about him and my mother when they were young that I was able to include in the beginning of the novel. And the whole novel is like, it's like, it's pretty damn good. But this is kind of where this is where the editing needs to happen. I've still got names I have to change, and I just want to go over maybe a first and a second and possibly a third time, and just to make sure it's ready to be shipped out there. Make sure it's as good as it can possibly be. And there might be some mistakes, like in terms of things that could be. I want to get all the grammatical mistakes out of it, obviously. But like, some of you guys might remember my novel that came out in 2020. But it was kind of a rush job, and I wrote it in like, I think I wrote the first part of it maybe over the course of a year, and then all of a sudden I had this great ending because there was all this crazy shit going on in my life, and I just kind of rushed like the last half of the book, and then I published it, and then it just didn't turn out that good. So when in doubt, always spend a little extra time. Robert Greene was talking about that too. It's like, because that's the ego. It's like, I want to finish this book. I want to get it out there. I want to get feedback and ideas. But if you just take a little bit of time, you know, then you'll be much better off. Like if you can, that's part of the madness too, is like learning to be patient. It's like the werewolf within you that just wants to go out and start mauling people and creatively speaking and just wants to go crazy. But it's like if you just take another 6 months, take another year if need be, and just make it the way it needs to be. Keith Burnett says editing online with an audience is a great idea. Yeah, I think it would be good as like maybe a monthly series. It's probably not something I would do every day or on a weekly basis because I don't want to give too much away of the novel. But some of you guys have seen some of the samples on Instagram, and now you got a little bit of interactive. When I say I'm writing a novel, like I'm not lying about it. Like I got a little ahead of the game a couple of months ago, and I think I changed my Instagram status or something to new novel coming soon, of course, right? Because I had finished the novel. I was like, oh, I finished a novel. But when I went back and started reading it, I'm like, this is going to take another year at least, maybe more, to really get out there. So you have to always be suppressing the ego, because your ego will be your worst enemy. You and your brother were an inspiration in my recent work. We're still trying to figure out who the fuck you are, Keith Burnett. Like, that would be really interesting to know. But yeah, you're a pretty damn good writer. I'll say that. If you're not an AI, you're a pretty damn good writer. Dreamer says, can't say I ever wanted to maul someone. Yeah, I meant like creatively, because I think my book is going to maul people emotionally and spiritually, and I might even lose relationships over it, but like I'm willing to put myself out on the line like that, but like I don't want to fucking, go to court over it like I did last time, so I think this time is going to be a little better. Hopefully nobody takes me to court over this next novel. I don't think they will because mostly it's just about me and my family, Who could it possibly hurt? Famous last words. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone takes me to court over my writing. But I think it makes for a damn good story, don't you? But I think we'll leave it at that before I make a fool out of myself more than we already have. But that's a little bit about what it takes to really be a writer, what it really takes to be an editor. Um, it's gruesome, it's lonely, it's frustrating, but every once in a while, like chipping at a piece of marble or doing something like that, like you just hit a little bit of magic, and you can't obviously finish the whole thing in one night. That's why it's important to be very patient with yourself. You have to be very, very patient. They are your experiences as you recall them. Yeah, that's what I thought before, but it was enough to piss some people off. So Havinia Beach, yeah, Havinia Beach is just a fictional name that I came up with, and I'm not actually going to use it. I'm going to change it back to Virginia Beach. But when I first started writing this novel, Charles, I was trying to, I came up with all kinds of oddball names, and I was more like I was trying to disguise everything, but it's not necessary. I'd rather just be Virginia Beach, and then we got Wolf Snare Road here, but like that was sort of the initial idea. It was going to be more like a Thomas Wolfe type thing where everything was completely changed. And put it in the prelude. Yeah, this is a work of fiction. Any characters that are recognized are pure coincidence. Yeah, that's one way to save yourself from a potential court case. Is Wolf Snare Road a real road? I mean, I can't say for sure, but it's a pretty cool name. Wolf Snare Road. But, and it's not only like, I'll probably end the sequence with this. I want you guys to slowly leave the live stream, so I'll stop talking here. So by the time the next 5 minutes goes on, I expect 3 people to be watching. uh, but that's another part of the writing process, is it helps you immensely as a person emotionally and spiritually, because you're analyzing yourself in the whole contextual universe of all your loved ones and all your family members, and you're like retracing your steps, and you're like inventing some things maybe. But if you're writing the type of novel that I'm writing, right, if you're writing like an imaginative fantasy thing, like that can be cool too, but I don't think that's as enriching as, putting your personal experiences on the line. That's why I like Thomas Wolfe and Ernest Hemingway and Charles Bukowski and Dostoevsky and Marcel Proust and all these masters. Like, eventually I might move away from that. Like there's a lot of imaginative sort of stuff in my mind, but I think I want to kind of finish this universe first, and then maybe keep it going. But eventually I want to write like shorter novels too, just like more like, I don't even know. I have so many ideas, but I don't have enough time to really do it. So I'm just sort of trying to focus on this one. We haven't lost any viewers. You guys didn't do what I told you to do. But anyway, how long have you got? How long have I got till what? Till I finish it? I can already see some things to edit on that. Yeah, we haven't hit this page yet, Keith. So this is where we left off. So this all has to be edited. Every single part of it. And I can maybe go back and read you guys some experts or something, but like I said, I don't want to spoil too much of it. I love the how well read you are. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really that well read. I mean, I rattle off some names that I like and stuff like that, but every day I'm reading other things. I'm reading a book about how to interpret Shakespeare. I'm also reading The History of the Negro by Booker T. Washington, more like a historical essay analysis book. And we're reading Within a Budding Grove by Marcel Proust. That's the sequel to Swann's Way. I encourage you guys to check out Marcel Proust. Like, a lot of people got into Marcel Proust during the pandemic, because dictator Fauci locked everybody in their houses for like 3 years. So everybody was reading like Leo Tolstoy and Marcel Proust and all this stuff. And I'm also reading, what else am I reading? I can't remember, but I'm reading a bunch of other stuff. We're reading the book of Leviticus from the Old Testament. So I'm trying to be well read. I probably will never be well read because I didn't start taking reading seriously till it was far too late. But we're getting there. I think we'll call it quits, guys. I really appreciate you guys hanging around. I could sit here and ramble all night, but I don't want to overstay my welcome, as I always say. So I hope you guys enjoyed this writing process, and we will do it again maybe later in the future. Like maybe we'll just do like poems or short stories, because I don't want to keep featuring scenes from the novel, because then by the time everybody reads it, everybody's going to say, oh, I remember that from his writing session that he did on YouTube. So anyway, everybody have a great night. Stay creative, and we'll talk to you guys very soon.